Brian was losing it. 1 in the morning. Gas station on Burnside. His hands shaking so hard he couldn't get his wallet out of his pocket. The rut had hit 40 minutes ago, and it was bad. The worst in months. His pheromones were flooding the store, burnt copper and juniper so thick the cashier had backed against the far wall. Brian's vision was going red at the edges. His jaw was locked. He could feel the part of his brain that wanted to break things getting louder, and the part that kept him human getting quieter, and the distance between the two shrinking fast. He gripped the counter and tried to breathe. Then a voice came through the gas station speakers. "So I was on the bus today and this woman just started telling me about her grandson's soccer game. Every goal. I don't know anything about soccer, but I was so into it. His name is Miguel and he's 6, and apparently he's got a really good left foot. Anyway, let me play this." Brian's hands loosened on the counter. The red pulled back. The song started playing, quiet and warm, filling the gas station like the air itself had unclenched. The shaking stopped. The red disappeared. The copper taste faded from his mouth. Brian just stood there, breathing normally for the first time in an hour. He paid for the water he'd come in for, walked back to his car, got in, and turned the radio on. 92.3. The voice was back. "That was Kishi, Soft Spot. I've been playing that one a lot lately. It just fits this time of night. Okay, we've got a caller. Hey, you're on after midnight." A man called in. Said he was working a night shift at a warehouse, and his mate was at home asleep, and he just wanted to hear something that reminded him of him. Noah asked the mate's name, asked what he was like, and the caller talked for a minute about how they'd met at a dog park when his retriever knocked the guy into a puddle. Noah laughed and played something soft and slow and let it run without talking over it. Brian drove, nowhere in particular, through the empty streets of Portland at 1:30 in the morning, past closed shops and bridge lights and quiet neighborhoods where porch lights were the only signs of life. He drove and listened. The voice kept going, warm and scattered, jumping from the soccer story to a caller requesting a folk song to a 5-minute tangent about whether the moon looked different in different cities. Brian listened to all of it. Forgot the rut. Forgot the red. At 4 in the morning, Noah signed off. "Okay, that's my time. I always say I'm going to end on time and then I don't because someone calls in with a good story and I lose track. Anyway, thank you for being here tonight. Go sleep. Or eat something, or both. I'll be back tomorrow. Good night." Brian pulled over on a side street and turned off the engine. His pheromones had settled to almost nothing. His hands were still. His jaw didn't ache. He'd just driven around Portland for 3 hours listening to a stranger talk about soccer and the moon and play music, and the worst night of his month had turned into something close to peaceful. He drove home. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Now back to the story. Noah had fallen into radio the way he fell into most good things in his life. Sideways, with a push from someone who knew him better than he knew himself. His friend Erin, a beta woman who managed a vintage record shop on Hawthorne, had seen the listing. Overnight host, community station. The pay was bad, the hours were worse, and nobody else wanted the slot. Erin forwarded it to him with a single text. "This is literally just you, but with a microphone." She wasn't wrong. Noah had a music production degree from a state school in Washington and an almost scary ability to make people comfortable. Strangers told him their life stories in grocery store lines. Baristas remembered his name after one visit. He'd once spent 40 minutes on a bus talking to an elderly woman about her grandson's stamp collection and walked away knowing more about Peruvian postage than any 26-year-old Omega had a right to. The music production career hadn't taken off. The degree was real, the internships were real, but the jobs were scarce, and Noah had spent 2 years freelancing for small studios that paid late. Or not at all. When Erin sent that text, the idea of getting paid to play music and talk to people sounded perfect. KXRD was a community station above Aaron's record shop, run by a retired beta named Pax, who'd been trying to fill the overnight slot for months. Noah showed up, charmed him in 12 minutes, and got hired. Low stakes, no pressure, just music and talking, and the freedom that comes with a job nobody else wants. The show was simple. Noah played music, took calls, and talked. He talked a lot. He'd start a sentence about a song and end up 15 minutes into a story about the time he tried to learn skateboarding at 23 and fell into a bush. He'd read a listener message about insomnia and somehow pivot to a 5-minute tangent about whether octopuses dream. He talked to his callers the way he talked to everyone, like they were already friends, like the conversation had started before the phone rang and would continue after it hung up. He remembered their names, asked follow-up questions from previous calls, got genuinely excited when someone requested a song he loved, which was most songs, because Noah loved most things. He embraced being an Omega the way he embraced most parts of himself. Openly, without apology. He wore his scent patches on air because it was professional, not because he was hiding. Off air, he let his scent breathe freely. Cold mineral water and wild thyme. His friends said it smelled like hiking near a river. The show was a side gig. During the day he still freelanced, still lived in a narrow apartment above a Vietnamese bakery on Division that smelled like bread dough and lemongrass. He was 26, single and not worried about it. He took his suppressants every morning for heat management, 3 days every few months where he called in sick and rode it out at home with takeout and bad movies. He'd find his mate eventually. He believed in the process, believed the right alpha would show up when the timing was right. Brian, on the other hand, had not slept properly in 3 years. The rut aggression had started when he presented at 15, but it got bad at 17. The same year his mother packed 2 suitcases and left his father's house in Lake Oswego. She couldn't live with the unpredictability anymore. Brian's father, a real estate developer named Richard, was an alpha with the same condition. He managed it with bourbon and willpower and a corner office with a thick door. Brian inherited the condition and replaced drinking with working, built his own angel investment firm by 28 through sheer force of focus, pouring every ounce of destructive energy into spreadsheets and pitch meetings and portfolio analysis. By 32, he managed a fund worth $40 million and had a reputation in Portland's startup scene as the guy who saw potential before anyone else did. Kevin, his assistant and closest friend, was the only person who knew the full picture. Another alpha, built like a linebacker, calm in a way that came from growing up in a house full of younger siblings. Kevin had been Brian's college roommate, had seen the first bad episode at 19 when Brian tore apart their shared dorm room during a rut and came to covered in his own blood with no memory of the previous 4 hours. Kevin cleaned him up, drove him to urgent care, and never mentioned it to anyone. When Brian started the firm, Kevin was the first hire. The night at the gas station changed things. Brian didn't tell Kevin about it right away. It felt too fragile, too strange, too much like a coincidence that wouldn't survive examination. But 2 weeks later, alone in his house at midnight, the rut came back. His first instinct was to drive, but before he could reach the door, the memory stopped him. The voice, the song, the quiet. He grabbed his phone, typed KXRD Portland into the search bar, found the live stream, pressed play. So I made this pasta tonight, or I tried to, and I put way too much garlic in it, like an embarrassing amount, and then I ate the whole thing anyway because I'm not a quitter. But now my apartment smells like a garlic farm, and honestly I'm kind of into it. Oh, have you guys heard this trumpet record? Hold on, let me play this. A trumpet that sounded like it was apologizing. The rut retreated. Brian lay in his bed with his phone on the pillow and Noah's voice filling the dark bedroom and breathed without pain. After that, the pattern set. Brian tuned in every night. Not just during rut episodes. Every night. He listened while he worked late on pitch evaluations. Listened while he cooked dinners he barely tasted. Listened while lying in bed staring at the ceiling. The show became the background of his life. Noah's voice was there when he reviewed term sheets at midnight, there when he couldn't sleep at 2, there when the early morning quiet of his house in the West Hills felt too large for one person. He learned Noah's rhythms. Noah started stories in the middle and circled back to the beginning 10 minutes later. He got distracted by his own tangents and then said, "Wait, where was I?" and the callers would remind him. He remembered that a listener named Marcus had a job interview last week and asked on air how it went. Brian had spent his entire adult life reading people for a living, separating the genuine from the performance. Noah had no performance. He was just like this, open and warm and easily distracted. And himself, at 1 in the morning, talking to strangers like they mattered. Months passed. Brian never called in, never sent a message. He was a ghost in the audience. But the Rut episodes softened, the edges blurred. The red came less often and retreated faster. Kevin noticed the change before Brian could name it. "You seem better," Kevin said one morning, 3 months into Brian's nightly habit of listening. "Not good, but better. Like you're sleeping." "I'm sleeping." "Since when?" "Since I found something that helps." Kevin waited. Brian didn't elaborate. Kevin, who understood that some things you accepted without examining, moved on. 4 months in, Brian knew things about Noah that Noah had never told him directly. He knew Noah's mother ran a restaurant in Sellwood. Knew Noah's father had died 4 years ago. Knew Noah had a friend named Aaron who worked at a record shop and a friend named Danny who occasionally filled in on the show when Noah was sick. Knew that Noah's favorite song changed weekly, but he had a few he kept returning to, and that he played the same quiet folk song every time a caller was going through a breakup, because he said it was the only song that makes sadness feel like company instead of punishment. Brian listened to all of it, cataloged it, filed it in a part of his brain he didn't examine too closely, because examining it would mean admitting that his entire medical well-being depended on an Omega radio host who didn't know he existed. 5 months in, Noah played a song at 3 in the morning and said afterward, very quietly, "That one's for me tonight. I'm having one of those weeks where everything feels a little too heavy. But that's okay. Heavy weeks end, they always do." Brian, lying in bed in the dark, felt his chest crack open. This person who spent every night carrying other people's weight had just, for 10 seconds, put his own down. And Brian wanted, badly enough that it scared him, to be the person who carried it for him. He almost called in that night, had the station number dialed. His thumb was over the call button. He put the phone down and stared at the ceiling until the broadcast ended. If you're enjoying the story, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I read every single one. All right, let's get back to the story. Then Noah disappeared. It happened on a Thursday, 5.5 months after the gas station. Brian opened the live stream at midnight and heard Danny's voice instead of Noah's. "Hey, this is Danny. I'm filling in for Noah tonight. He's taking some time off. Anyway, let's get into it." Brian closed the laptop, opened it again, closed it. His heart rate, which had been settling into its usual broadcast-calmed rhythm, spiked back up. He could feel the copper pheromones sharpening in his home office, the juniper edge returning. He told himself it was fine. People took days off. Noah would be back tomorrow, or the day after, or next week, but Noah was not back the next night. Or the night after that. Danny kept filling in with competent but unremarkable broadcasts that did nothing for Brian. By the 4th night, Brian's Rut cycle arrived without the safety net he'd spent 5 months building, and the episode was the worst he'd had since before the gas station. He put his fist through the bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning and spent the rest of the night sitting on the tile floor picking glass out of his knuckles while his body burned. Kevin found the mirror the next day. Didn't say anything. Just cleaned it up and replaced it. the way he always did. On the 6th night, Brian called the station. Danny picked up. "KXRD, you're on after midnight." "Where's Noah?" A pause. "He's taking some time off. Did you want to request a song or—" "I don't want a song. When is he coming back?" "Honestly, man, I don't know. Can I help you with something? Is he okay?" "He's fine, as far as I know. He just needed some time. Look, are you all right? You sound kind of—" Brian hung up. He sat in his dark home office for a long time. The mirror episode was 2 nights ago, and his knuckles were still bandaged. The rut had passed but left the aftermath it always did. Exhaustion, shame, the awareness that he was 32 years old and held together by a stranger's voice on the radio. A stranger who was now gone. The next morning, he walked into Kevin's office and closed the door. Kevin took in Brian's face, the bandaged hand, the shadows under his eyes. "Bad one?" "The worst in months." "What happened?" Brian told him. The radio show, the host, 5 months of listening, the voice that made the rut stop. All of it. Kevin was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "And now the host is gone." "Yes. And you want to find him?" "Yes. You know how that sounds, right?" "Yes." Kevin studied him. Then he opened a new tab on his laptop. "What do we know?" It took Kevin 4 hours. The record shop was real, Aaron was real, and a careful conversation between Kevin and the shop's afternoon employee revealed that Noah had gone home to help his mother, who'd broken her hip and couldn't manage her restaurant alone. "The restaurant is called Stone Bowl," Kevin said, sliding a notepad across the desk. "Small place in Sellwood. His dad passed a few years ago and Noah's an only child, so when his mom got hurt, he was the only one who could step in." Brian stared at the address. "Brian." Kevin's voice carried the weight it got when he was about to say something honest. "I found him because you asked and because I trust you. But you need to understand that showing up at this man's mother's restaurant because his voice helps your rut cycles is, from his perspective, going to be terrifying." "I know." "Do you?" "Because you are a 6'2" alpha with bandaged knuckles who hasn't slept in a week." "I'm not going to hurt him." "I know that. He doesn't." Brian put the notepad in his jacket pocket. "Then I'll make sure he knows." Stone Bowl was a small Korean restaurant in Sellwood, the sort that survived on regulars and word of mouth. The sign was hand-painted, the windows were steamed from the kitchen. Brian sat in his car for 20 minutes before going in, watching through the fogged glass. He could see movement inside. A figure passing between tables, stopping to laugh with an older couple near the window. Lean, medium height, dark hair that fell across his forehead, a face that defaulted to warmth the way other faces defaulted to neutral. Brian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His pheromones flared. Burnt copper and cold concrete filling the car. His body knew before his brain caught up. The person behind that glass was the voice. He got out, walked to the door, pushed it open. The restaurant was warm and smelled like garlic and something grilling. Brian stood in the doorway and his gaze found the person he was looking for. Noah was clearing a table near the back, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a dish towel over one shoulder. He was humming. Then he looked up. The plate in his hand slipped. He caught it, barely, but the water glass next to it toppled off the table and shattered on the tile. Noah didn't notice. He was staring at Brian, and Brian was staring back. 10 seconds. That's how long they stood there, locked in eye contact across a small restaurant while a broken glass bled water across the floor. Noah's omega biology registered the burnt copper and cold concrete scent that had just walked through the door and responded with a jolt so sharp he felt it in his scent glands, in his spine, in the sudden wild acceleration of his heartbeat. His wild time flared behind his patches, pulsing so hard the adhesive couldn't contain it, and for a disorienting moment the restaurant smelled like a mountainside after rain. Brian felt it too. Hit him in the chest. The copper in his blood surged, not in rut, not in anger, but in recognition. Something old and deep and biological. His body was saying finally. Noah broke first, blinked, looked down at the broken glass, and his default warmth reassembled itself. Oh my God. Sorry, I'm so clumsy. Just give me 1 second. Brian walked to the nearest open table and sat down. Noah appeared 30 seconds later. Hi, welcome to Stone Bowl. Can I get you something to drink? Brian looked up at him. From this distance, the scent flooded him. Wild thyme and cold mineral water, and underneath it something sweeter, darker. Bruised fig. He filed every note away without meaning to. Water, Brian said, and whatever you'd recommend. The special tonight is really good. My mom's recipe. Well, my mom yelling the recipe from the back while I try not to burn it. Noah grinned, crooked and genuine and devastating. Fair warning, I'm a better radio host than a cook. I'll take the special. Great choice. Bold, considering the disclaimer. Noah scribbled on his pad, then hesitated. Sorry about the glass thing. I wasn't expecting. You have a very strong... He gestured vaguely at Brian's general existence. Presence. I get that a lot. I bet you do. Noah laughed, light and easy, and walked toward the kitchen. Brian ate slowly. Watched Noah work the room, chatting with every table, making the old couple laugh, bringing extra napkins to a family with a toddler before they asked. Every few minutes, Noah glanced at Brian's table, quick stolen looks that he probably thought were subtle and absolutely were not. When Noah came to clear the plate, he leaned across Brian to grab the water glass on the far side of the table. His forearm brushed Brian's shoulder. 2 seconds of contact. In those 2 seconds, Noah's wild thyme hit Brian from 6 inches away, unfiltered, and Brian's hand closed around the edge of the table so hard the wood creaked. Noah heard it, looked down at Brian's white-knuckled grip, looked up at his face, and for a flash the cheerful mask slipped and what was underneath was heat. Pure, startled, omega heat, gone as fast as it appeared, covered by a grin and a step backward. Can I ask you something? Brian said. His voice came out rougher than intended. Noah set the plate on his tray. Depends. Is it about the food? Because if the answer is constructive criticism, my mom's in the back and she will come out here and you do not want that. What time do you close? Noah's eyebrows lifted. 9:30. Why? I'll wait, outside. I'd like to talk to you when you're done. Noah studied him. An alpha he'd never met, sitting in his mother's restaurant, asking to wait for him after close. Talk about what? Your radio show. Surprise, then confusion, then delight, fighting with caution. You listen to After Midnight? Every night, for 5 months. 5 months? Seriously? I wouldn't be here if I wasn't serious. Noah bit his lower lip. Okay, that's actually really sweet. Most of my listeners are insomniacs and truck drivers. He paused. You're not stalking me, are you? Ha, I'm kidding, mostly. I'm not stalking you. That's what a stalker would say. But fine, 9:30, outside. Don't be creepy about it. Brian paid the bill, left a tip that was triple the meal, went to his car and waited for 90 minutes. At 9:52, Noah walked out. Apron off, jacket on, backpack slung over one shoulder. He spotted Brian's car and walked over. Brian got out. They stood in the parking lot. Then the wind shifted, blowing from Noah's direction, and Brian caught the full unguarded scent of him. Cold mineral water and wild thyme hitting his alpha brain with a force that made his hand find the car door behind him to keep himself upright. So, Noah said, you're the guy, the one who called the station looking for me. Danny told me, said some alpha called in sounding, and I'm quoting, kind of intense and maybe unhinged. Brian winced. That was me. Danny called you a creep. That's fair. I told him I was flattered. Noah shoved his hands in his jacket pockets. I've never had a fan track me down before, so this is new. I should explain. You should. Because right now the story is Alpha I've never met found out where I work and sat through dinner alone to talk to me about radio. And that's either romantic or a true crime podcast. The laugh that came out of Brian surprised them both. Short, rough, unpracticed. I have rut aggression syndrome, Brian said. It's genetic. My father had it. I presented at 15 and the ruts were bad from the start, but they got worse after my mother left when I was 17. The medication doesn't work for me. He held up his bandaged hand. 2 weeks ago. Bathroom mirror. Noah's expression shifted, the playfulness layered with real attention. 5 months ago, Brian continued. I was at a gas station at 1 a.m. in the middle of an episode. I went inside and your voice came through the speakers, some late-night show I'd never heard of, and everything stopped. The rut, the anger, the red in my vision. I didn't even buy what I went in for. I just stood there listening. Then I got in my car and turned on the station and drove around for 3 hours listening to you talk and play music, and it was the first time since I was 17 that a rut episode ended without me breaking something. Noah was very still. I started listening every night. Not just during episodes, every night. Your voice does something to me that no medication, no specialist, no coping strategy has ever done. You make it quiet. You make my brain quiet, and then you disappeared, and the episodes came back, and I'm standing in your mother's parking lot at 10 at night, because you are the only thing that has ever worked. My voice really does that? Completely. Huh. Noah looked at him with his head tilted. Nobody's ever said anything like that to me before. People call in and say the show helps them sleep or gets them through their shift, but nobody's ever said I made their rut stop. You're the only thing that's ever made it stop. The words hung between them. Noah's scent shifted. The wild thyme deepened, and underneath it, the bruised fig surfaced. Brian's body responded instantly, the copper going warm, his pulse dropping to a calm he associated only with Noah's voice. But this was different. This was Noah's scent doing what his voice had been doing through speakers for 5 months, and it was 10 times stronger. Noah looked at him for a long time. Then the grin came back. Well, you found me. And now you know I'm not dead, just making bad food for my mom's customers. So what happens now? Can I come back? To the restaurant. Tomorrow. You're asking permission to eat at a restaurant that's open to the public? I'm asking permission to see you again. Noah laughed. Full, bright, richer in person than through speakers. Yeah, Brian, you can come back. They exchanged numbers. When their fingers brushed during the phone handoff, they both felt it. A pulse. More like a tuning fork struck against bone. A single clear note that resonated through both their bodies and then faded, leaving behind the clear awareness that this had just begun. Noah walked to his bus stop. Brian sat in his car and stared at the contact in his phone. Noah. KXRD. His pheromones had gone so calm they were nearly scentless. His hands were still. His vision was clear and free of red. His phone buzzed. A text from Noah, sent 45 seconds after they'd parted. For the record, I would have said yes even without the sob story. You're very handsome, and my mom already asked why I dropped a glass when you walked in. Good night, Brian. Brian read it 3 times. Then he drove home through Portland streets that looked different than they had 2 hours ago. Brighter. Sharper. Brian came back to Stone Bowl the next night, and the night after that. He told himself it was about the food, about wanting to support the restaurant, about anything other than the truth. which was that he needed to be in the same room as Noah the way he needed the radio show. Proximity had become a requirement. Noah noticed. Of course he noticed. He was a person who paid attention to people for a living, and the tall, quiet alpha who sat at the same corner table every evening and ordered whatever Noah recommended and tipped like he was trying to fund a small country was not difficult to notice. The second visit, their hands brushed when Noah set down the water glass. A graze of knuckles. Noah's wild time spiked and Brian's copper answered, and they both pretended it hadn't happened. The third visit, Noah sat down across from Brian during his break. Just for 5 minutes. He talked about a song he'd heard that day, something acoustic and quiet that he couldn't get out of his head, and Brian listened like he was memorizing every word. When Noah got up to go back to work, he put his hand on Brian's shoulder for balance and left it there 1 second longer than he needed to. Brian's pheromones went so warm and low that Noah could smell the shift from 3 tables away for the rest of the night. The fourth visit, Brian brought Noah's mother soup from a place Noah had mentioned once. Noah stared at the container like Brian had handed him something much larger than soup. "You remembered that? You mentioned it." "I mentioned it once, in a parking lot, at 10 at night." Brian shrugged. Noah looked at him with an expression that was doing complicated things beneath the surface, then carried the soup to the kitchen. Brian heard Noah's mother say something in Korean. Noah came back with pink cheeks and didn't explain. They texted, not constantly, but enough. Noah sent voice notes because he said typing felt impersonal. Brian responded in short, precise sentences that Noah found endearing for reasons he couldn't articulate. They hadn't been on a date, hadn't called whatever this was by any name. They were 2 people orbiting each other with increasing velocity and decreasing distance, and the only question was which one of them would break the pattern first. The rut answered for them. It happened on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after Brian first walked into Stone Bowl. He was in his home office, reviewing a pitch deck. The rut had been building all day, a low burn he'd been managing with work and the memory of Noah's hand on his shoulder. But memory wasn't enough. The burn sharpened. The copper and juniper saturated his office. His vision started to tint. He reached for his phone, pulled up Noah's contact and pressed call. Noah picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" "I need." Brian's voice came out wrong, guttural. "I need you." "Brian, are you okay?" "Rut. Bad one. I can't stop it." "Where are you?" "Home. Send me your address, right now." "Noah, I don't want you to see me like—" "Brian, address, now." Brian sent his location, his gate code, his front door code. Then he dropped the phone and gripped the edge of the desk. Noah grabbed his mom's car keys without explanation and drove from Sellwood to the West Hills in 18 minutes. The house was dark. The first thing that hit Noah was the scent. Burnt copper and cold concrete so concentrated the air tasted like metal. Juniper sharp enough to sting. This wasn't the warm version of Brian's scent that Noah had come to know across a restaurant table. This was Brian in crisis. Noah found him in the office. Desk chair overturned, papers scattered. A glass shattered on the floor. Brian was on the floor in the corner, back against the wall, knees drawn up, hands buried in his hair. "Brian," Noah said from the doorway, "I'm here." Brian's head snapped up. Eyes dark, pupils blown, the whites shot through with red. His pheromones were screaming. Every alpha instinct broadcasting danger. Noah walked toward him. "You need to leave," Brian said through his teeth. His whole body was vibrating. "I called you, and I shouldn't have. You called me because some part of you knows I'm the safest thing in your life right now, so shut up and let me help." Noah crouched in front of him, close enough to touch. Brian's pheromones hit him like a wall. His omega biology went haywire. Scent glands fired, all of them, wild thyme and mineral water flooding the space. His skin went hot. The bruised fig surfaced, not distress but response, his body answering Brian's crisis with a signal that said, "I'm here. I'm here. I'm yours." Brian made a sound, low, broken. His hands came out of his hair and his fist closed around the front of Noah's jacket and pulled. Noah went. Let himself be pulled until he was pressed against Brian's chest, knees on either side of Brian's hips, hands braced on the wall behind them. Brian's face buried in his neck, right against the scent gland, and the sound he made when Noah's scent hit him at full strength was the most vulnerable thing Noah had ever heard come out of another person. Brian's arms locked around him, crushing, his body shuddering as the rut collided with Noah's pheromones. The copper surged, the time surged back. For 10 seconds, the air was chemical warfare. Then something shifted, something aligned. The copper went soft, the juniper dissolved. Brian's arms loosened from crushing to holding, his breathing slowed from ragged to deep. The red in his eyes receded. His forehead dropped to Noah's shoulder, and he exhaled, long and shaking. "You stopped it," Brian whispered against Noah's neck. "You're doing it right now." Noah's body was doing this on its own, pouring out pheromones at a rate he'd never experienced. His hands were in Brian's hair, his pulse was hammering. His biology was responding to the alpha pressed against him with a heat that had nothing to do with his suppressant-managed cycle and everything to do with the specific man beneath his hands. They stayed like that. Minutes that felt like hours. Brian's breathing normalized. The office stopped smelling like a war zone and started smelling like copper and thyme woven together into something that had never existed in that room before. Brian's hands moved. Slowly, from Noah's back to his waist, his grip shifted, and Noah felt himself being pulled closer. Chest to chest, hip to hip. Brian's mouth was still against his neck, still pressed to the scent gland, and when his lips parted, and Noah felt the warm brush of breath against the most sensitive skin on his body, his spine went liquid. A sound escaped him, thin and involuntary, and Brian's fingers dug into his waist at the sound of it, pulling him down harder into his lap. Brian's hand came up to Noah's jaw, thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone. He leaned in. For 3 thundering heartbeats, they were close enough to kiss. Noah could feel Brian's breath on his lips, could see the want fighting the restraint. Brian's other hand was at the base of Noah's spine, pressing him forward, and Noah's body curved into him, like his bones already knew the shape they were supposed to make against this man. Brian pulled Noah against his chest instead, wrapped both arms around him, and held on. "Thank you," Brian said into Noah's hair. "Thank you for coming." Noah's eyes were stinging. He buried his face in Brian's shoulder and breathed him in. He didn't have a word for what this felt like. He just knew he didn't want to move. They stayed on the office floor until Brian fell asleep. Noah extracted himself, found a blanket, covered him, cleaned up the broken glass. Then he went to Brian's bedroom and lay on the edge of the bed with his jacket still on and the full weight of what had just happened settling into his bones. Morning, sunlight, the smell of coffee. Brian was in the kitchen, showered, dressed, looking like a different person from the one on the floor 8 hours ago. "I made coffee." Brian didn't look at him. "I also have my driver downstairs whenever you're ready to go." "You sent your driver for me." "Last night shouldn't have happened. I put you in danger." Noah leaned against the doorframe. "Are you doing the thing where you push me away because you're embarrassed, or the thing where you push me away because you actually want me to leave?" Brian's hand stilled on the coffee mug. "I don't want you to leave." "Then tell your driver to go home and give me a cup of coffee." They drank coffee at Brian's kitchen counter. talked about nothing important. The wreckage of the previous night between them. Noah left at 8. At the door, he turned back. "Brian." "Yeah? Next time it happens, call me again." "I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask. I'm telling you. Call me." He left. Brian stood in his doorway and watched his mom's old car pull out of the driveway. Kevin was in Brian's office by 9. He took one look at the overturned chair, the scattered papers, and then at Brian, whose pheromones were doing something Kevin had never encountered in 14 years. "Your scent is different," Kevin said. "I'm fine." "I didn't say you weren't fine. The copper is warmer, and there's something underneath that isn't yours." Kevin sat down. "Who was here last night?" Brian didn't answer. Kevin pulled out his phone, typed, "Read," looked up with wonder. "Brian, have you ever heard of a sympathetic pheromone lock?" "No." "It's a fated mate response. When an omega's pheromones are perfectly compatible with an alpha's, the omega can override the alpha's rut response entirely. The alpha's biology recognizes them as the destined match." Kevin set his phone down. "An omega's voice doesn't calm rut aggression through speakers. That's not a thing. Unless the alpha is already biologically locked to that omega. You've been listening to your fated mate on the radio for 5 months and you didn't know it." Brian stared at him. "The reason his voice works is because your body knew he was yours before you ever met him." Brian said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Don't tell him." "Brian." "Not yet. If he finds out we're fated mates before he's had a chance to choose this on his own, it takes the choice away. You can't keep this from him forever. I'm keeping it until he knows me well enough that the biology isn't the reason he stays." Everything changed after the rut night. Not loudly, not with declarations or labels, but the air between them was different now. They'd been through something together that existed outside of words, and the memory of it lived in both their bodies, in the way Noah's scent glands pulsed when Brian walked into the restaurant, in the way Brian's copper softened the moment he heard Noah's voice. They had a before and an after, and they were standing in the after, trying to figure out what it meant. Brian asked Noah to dinner. A proper dinner outside the restaurant where Noah worked. Noah said yes immediately. They went to a ramen shop Noah chose because, he said, "You can't fake being a good person while eating ramen. If you can be charming with broth on your chin, you're the real deal." Brian wore a dark sweater instead of his usual suit because Kevin had looked at him getting ready and said, "You're not closing a Series A, you're eating noodles with a cute omega. Take the jacket off." Brian had taken the jacket off, and the tie, and put a different jacket on, then taken that off too. Kevin watched from the doorway looking like he couldn't decide if he was proud or horrified. "You're nervous," Kevin had said, delighted. "I'm not nervous. You just changed your shirt 4 times. Get out of my house, Kevin." At the ramen shop, Noah was already there talking to the server about the specials. When Brian walked in, Noah looked up and smiled, and Brian's respiratory system forgot its primary function. They talked for 3 hours. Otta ramen that produced exactly the mess Noah had predicted. Halfway through, Brian looked up from his bowl and Noah laughed. "You have broth on your chin. Here." And without thinking, he reached across the table and swiped his thumb across Brian's jaw. 1 second. But the pad of Noah's thumb crossed the line of Brian's jaw where alpha pheromones ran closest to the surface, and it registered in both of them like a bell struck in a quiet room. Brian went still. Dangerously still. Noah's thumb was on Brian's jaw. He could feel the muscle clenched underneath, could feel the heat of Brian's skin. His scent gland pulsed at his wrist, the wild thyme pushing out in a warm wave, and Brian's pupils expanded until his dark eyes were nearly black. Noah pulled his hand back. "Sorry. Force of habit. My mom says I have no concept of personal space." "Don't apologize," Brian said. His voice had dropped half an octave. Neither of them mentioned it. But the memory of Brian's skin under Noah's thumb lived in the space between them for the rest of the night, and both of them knew it. Noah talked about his mom, about his dad's death 4 years ago, about leaving the show to help. Brian told Noah about the firm, about Kevin, about the apartment in the West Hills. He did not tell Noah about his father. Not yet. They split the bill because Noah insisted, "You're paying next time. This time I want this to feel like 2 people having dinner." "Next time," Brian repeated. "Obviously, next time." They did it again, and again, and again. Noah called them hangouts. Brian called them nothing. But Kevin, who watched Brian leave the office early for the 4th time in 2 weeks with his hair actually styled, called them what they were. "You're dating him. I'm getting to know him. You changed your cologne. You are dating him." The change in Brian was something Kevin noticed. He'd spent 14 years watching his friend for signs of collapse, and he knew what better looked like. Brian, in a pitch meeting, was the same man he'd always been, precise, controlled, pheromones locked down. He could take apart a founder's business plan in 30 seconds. The copper and concrete scent alone communicated what words didn't. Alphas straightened up. Omegas went quiet. Then Noah would text, and Brian's watch would buzz, and Kevin would watch the transformation. The jaw unclenching, the shoulders dropping. One time, during a tense negotiation with a fintech founder, Brian's watch lit up with a message from Noah. A blurry photo of a pigeon sitting on a fire hydrant with the caption, "This guy has been staring at me for 10 minutes. I think he wants something." Brian glanced at his wrist. His scent shifted. The founder blinked and said, "Your terms are fair. Let's move forward." Kevin made a note on his legal pad. Noah's pigeon photo just closed a $4 million deal. He showed the note to Brian after the meeting. Brian gave Kevin a look that would have frozen magma. "Delete that." "I'm framing it." The weeks turned into a month, then 6 weeks. The rut night was behind them, but it lived in their bodies like a shared secret. Every accidental touch carried the echo of what had happened on that office floor. The weight of Noah in Brian's lap. The sound Brian had made against Noah's neck. Week 2, after their first dinner. Walking back from a food cart pod, the cold biting through Noah's jacket, when Brian shrugged off his coat and dropped it over Noah's shoulders without breaking stride. The coat was warm from Brian's body, saturated with copper and concrete and juniper. Noah pulled it tighter and the fabric pressed against his scent gland, and the alpha pheromones hit him like a match to paper. His knees buckled. A half-step stumble he covered by adjusting his shoe. But the time went lush and ripe, the fig bleeding through, and Brian inhaled sharply and didn't speak for a block. At Noah's bus stop, Noah tried to give the coat back. Brian said, "Keep it." Noah wore it home, slept in it. Woke up surrounded by copper and juniper and a want so physical, it made his teeth ache. Week 3. Brian drove Noah home because the buses had stopped. The car was a closed space. Their scents filled it in minutes, thyme and copper braiding in the warm air, producing something sweet and grounding. Noah was talking about a song, gesturing, and his fingers brushed Brian's forearm on the center console. Brian stopped breathing. His jaw locked. The copper spiked. 10 minutes of charged silence. Windows fogging from the inside. At Noah's building, "Thanks for the ride." "Any time." And neither of them moved for 8 seconds. Then Noah got out and Brian drove away, and both of them sat in separate rooms breathing hard, replaying those 8 seconds. Week 4. Noah fell asleep on Brian's shoulder at a movie. 20 minutes in, his head drifted sideways and stayed. Brian did not move. For 90 minutes, he breathed as shallowly as possible and felt Noah's warmth against his arm and smelled the wild thyme rising from his hair and his neck where the scent gland pulsed gently in sleep. His rut went quiet. All of it. Gone. When the credits rolled, Noah blinked awake. Did I sleep through the whole thing? Was I drooling? He had not been drooling. He had been, without knowing it, doing more for Brian's nervous system in 90 minutes than 14 years of medication. Week 5. Closing time at Stone Bowl. Brian was the last customer. Noah wiped down tables, talking about a song he'd been obsessed with, humming the bass line and swaying his hips without realizing it while he cleaned. Brian watched and felt something come loose in his chest. The want he'd been containing since the rut night suddenly didn't fit in the box anymore. Noah turned and caught him staring, stopped mid-hum. The air tightened. Noah's scent glands flared, thyme and fig hitting the empty restaurant without other bodies to dilute it. Brian could taste it on his tongue, sweet and green and alive. He stood up. Noah took half a step toward him, 3 feet apart. The distance felt like a dare. "You should go," Noah said. His voice was barely there. "I know." Neither of them moved. "Brian," Noah's fingers were wrapped around the dish towel so tight his knuckles were pale. "If you don't leave right now, I'm going to do something I haven't thought through." "What would you do?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Brian picked up his jacket, walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. "Good night, Noah." "Good night." Then, quieter, "Oh, I'm in trouble." Brian heard it, pretended he didn't. Noah was falling. Slowly, with full awareness and a running commentary to Aaron. "He held the door for me today," Noah told Aaron, lying on his childhood bed. "And his hand was on my lower back for 1 second when I walked through, and Aaron. I almost passed out. From a hand on my back. I'm 26, I've been touched before. But his hand was warm, and it was right there on my spine, and I could feel his scent on my skin for the rest of the day. And then I keep thinking about that night, at his house, when he was in rut, and I went over and he pulled me into his lap, and Aaron, his face was in my neck, and I could feel his mouth on my scent gland, and my whole body just, I can't even describe it. It was like every cell in me knew exactly where it was supposed to be. You're gone. I'm so gone, but I'm being careful. I know this started weird." Noah paused. "When I'm with him, I feel like the best version of myself. Not because he makes me try harder, because he pays attention. He actually listens." He remembered my mom's favorite restaurant from one conversation. Brought her soup without being asked, and she told me in Korean that he has good bone structure and I should lock it down. Your mom's not wrong. I know, that's the terrifying part. In the 6th week, Noah told Brian about his dad. They were sitting on the steps behind Stone Bowl after close, sharing leftovers Noah had boxed up from dinner service. He had a heart attack in the kitchen, Noah said. Right there, behind that counter. I was at the radio station. My mom called me at 2 in the morning. I remember the song that was playing when the phone rang. I still can't listen to it. He paused. He was a beta. Quiet guy. Never said much, but he made the best food I've ever tasted, and he taught me that showing up is the whole thing. You just show up. That's how you love someone. He sounds good. He was good. Noah looked at Brian. Your turn. So Brian told him about Richard, the rut aggression, the bourbon, the mother who left, the monthly silent visits. And Noah listened the way he listened on the radio, fully, without filling silence with advice. You should bring him food next time you visit, Noah said. You can't be awkward with your mouth full. Trust me. My mom and I went through a whole year after my dad died where we barely talked. Then she started teaching me to cook, and we ended up crying over a pot of soup, and things got better. Then Brian's phone rang. Kevin's name. Brian stepped outside. Noah watched through the window as his posture changed, shoulders squared, jaw locked. When he came back inside, his eyes were flat. I have to go. What happened? My father collapsed. He's at the hospital. I'm coming with you. They drove to the hospital. Brian gripping the steering wheel, pheromones gone cold and flat. Richard was in the ICU. The doctor said acute liver failure and limited options. Brian stood at the foot of the bed and didn't move. He'd been expecting this call for a decade. That didn't make it easier. Noah stayed, in the hallway, in the waiting area, brought coffee, made sure Brian ate, called Kevin to reschedule meetings. At 2 a.m, Brian found Noah asleep in a waiting room chair. He sat in the next chair and let his hand find Noah's in the dark. Noah woke to Brian's fingers laced through his, didn't open his eyes, squeezed back. Richard died 4 days later. Brian did not cry. What he felt was harder to name than grief, like mourning someone you'd never fully known. Kevin handed him the shoebox, found in Richard's office. Inside, every report card Brian had received, a newspaper clipping from when his firm made the Portland Business Journal, a graduation photograph Brian didn't know Richard had attended, and a receipt from a wire transfer for the exact amount of Brian's initial operating capital. Brian sat in his father's empty office holding the receipt and understanding for the first time that the man who never said, "I'm proud of you," had funded his entire career from the shadows. Noah found him that night at Stone Bowl, corner table, staring at the receipt. "He paid for it," Brian said. "My company, the seed money. It was him." "He loved you," Noah said, "in the worst, most frustrating way a person can love someone. From far enough away that you couldn't feel it. That's not love, that's cowardice. It can be both." "Come on," Noah said. "My mom made dinner. You need to eat." Noah's mother sat across from Brian at the family table, put food in front of him, refilled his bowl twice. At the end, she said something in Korean that Noah translated quietly. "She says you look like someone who's been carrying too much for too long. She says you can put it down here." The real crisis wasn't the death. Brian's father's estate was massive. Board members who'd been circling. A succession clause that turned Brian's personal life into a boardroom agenda. Kevin brought the news. "The board wants your timeline for bonding." "My timeline for bonding is none of their business." Stability clause. 12 months. In practice, that means a bond. "They have suggestions." Kevin slid a folder across the desk. "Omega candidates the board considers suitable." Brian didn't open the folder. "You know about Noah. I know you've been seeing him every day. I know your rut episodes have nearly stopped, and I know your scent goes calm the moment you hear his name." Kevin looked at him. "I also know the board won't approve." "Then it's a fight." Mrs. Park, 70 years old, senior board member, told Brian his father's legacy required a bond that strengthened the business. "With respect," Brian said, "my father's legacy is a company held together by fear and a liver that finally quit. I'm not repeating his approach to anything, including how I choose my mate." That night, Brian drove to Stone Bowl, after closing. He knocked on the side door and Noah opened it in sweatpants and a t-shirt with sauce on his cheek. "I need to tell you something." Noah leaned against the counter. "Tell me." "My father's company has a stability clause. The board wants me to bond with someone they approve of. They have a folder of candidates." Noah's time sharpened. The fig surfaced. "And you're here because you're not in the folder, and I don't care." Brian's voice cracked. "Because I am in love with you, and I have been since you served me dinner and warned me your cooking might be terrible. And I would rather fight every member of that board and lose everything my father built than bond with someone who isn't you." Noah wiped the sauce off his cheek. His eyes were bright. "You're in love with me?" "Yes. Since the dinner. Since before the dinner. Since the parking lot. Since the gas station. And the board. Can go to hell." Noah kissed Brian like he'd been thinking about it for months and had run out of reasons not to. His hands fisted in Brian's shirt, pulling him down. Brian's arms came around his waist, lifting him until Noah's feet barely touched the floor. Copper and thyme, concrete and mineral water, juniper and fig. The kitchen filled with a combined scent so dense and sweet it would take days to wear out. Brian pressed Noah against the counter. His hands found the bare skin at Noah's hips where the shirt had ridden up, and both of them shuddered. Noah's fingers moved to Brian's jaw, his neck, the back of his head. Brian's mouth left Noah's and traveled down his jaw to his throat, to the scent gland pulsing beneath the skin, and when his lips made contact, Noah made a sound that started as a gasp and ended as Brian's name. "Wait," Noah breathed. "My mom is upstairs." Brian's forehead dropped to Noah's shoulder. "Your mom is upstairs. She will bring a spatula." Brian laughed against Noah's neck. Noah pulled back, lips swollen, cheeks flushed. "I love you too, by the way." "Good. Now get out of here before my mother comes downstairs and we have to explain why the kitchen smells like a mating ceremony." Brian kissed him once more. Slow, his thumb tracing Noah's jaw. Then he left. He told Noah about the fated mate thing 2 days later, sitting on the floor of Noah's childhood bedroom, sharing takeout. Kevin figured it out. After the rut night, my scent had changed, something in it that wasn't mine. Brian paused. "It's called a sympathetic pheromone lock, a fated mate response. The reason your voice works on my rut through a radio is because my biology already recognized you. Before I knew your face, my body knew you were mine." "How long have you known?" "Since the morning after the rut." "That was months ago." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to choose me, not because biology said you had to." Noah laughed, bright and sudden. "Brian, I chose you when you were a stranger in a parking lot with bandaged knuckles. The biology didn't make me do any of that. I just like you." "You disaster." The copper went soft. Okay. I just told you I'm in love with you independently of a cosmic biological imperative and you say, okay? I'm processing. Process faster. I want to kiss you again. He did. The board got their answer 3 months later. Brian walked into the quarterly meeting with a bond mark on his neck, still faintly pink. The claiming bite had happened on a Sunday morning in Noah's apartment above the bakery, with Noah's hands in Brian's hair and Brian's mouth on his scent gland, and the smell of bread rising through the floorboards. Mrs. Park looked at the mark, looked at the financial projections showing the firm's strongest quarter, looked at the medical documentation confirming Brian's rut episodes had ceased since the bond. "The omega," she said. "My husband," Brian corrected. She closed the folder. "Your father would have fought this." "My father would have been wrong," she nodded. "Show me the projections for Q3. Noah returned to after midnight that same month. "Hey. Oh my God, I'm back. I'm actually back. This chair is so uncomfortable, I forgot how uncomfortable this chair is. I missed it though. I missed all of it. I missed you guys. A lot happened, I'll tell you about it, but first the lines are open. Call me. I want to hear from you tonight." The first caller came in immediately. "This is After Midnight. Hey, what's up? Can you play Soft Spot? It pulled me out of a bad place once, and it reminds me of someone very special." Noah went quiet. Then his voice changed, softer. "I know this voice." Brian, sitting in his office in the West Hills with his bond mark warm against his collar, closed his eyes and listened to the song that had been playing in a gas station on Burnside the night everything started. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.